Hi, welcome to A Bit Beyond the Basics of Immigration. Immigration enforcement. This is going to be pretty basic, partially because my knowledge is pretty basic about the topic. But I wanted to explore a little bit more about government agencies and their involvement in immigration enforcement. If you haven't watched the section about government agencies that's in the basic series, I recommend you watch that. If not, go ahead and come with me now. I feel like I hear things about immigrants being detained and arrested and other things, and I don't always understand, or I feel like it's not always clear in the way it's portrayed, where they're being detained and what's happening. I talked about this some before, but I want to get a little more depth about it now, a bit beyond the basics. So there are a few places. We've talked about ports of entry. That would be another good segment to watch if you haven't watched it, ports of entry. At the port of entry, the government agency who is there is CBP. Also at the border, ports of entry, which could be anywhere in the country, especially at airports, or anywhere along the border, we have CBP protecting our entry to the United States. So one place that people get detained, and we'll start with detain. People can be detained by CBP and put into detention facilities. At an airport, for example, CBP actually has a space right there to detain people. So if they find someone who's coming into the United States unlawfully with a improper visa or fake visa or different things, they can detain someone right there and usually will put them back on a plane and send them home. If it's a port of entry or the open border on the borders, they have larger facilities where they will go and they will detain them. And depending on what they're being detained for, they may turn around and remove them, send them back home, fly them back home right away. They may release them because that person has asked for asylum or some other type of benefit. They should not be detaining them very long if they're here. Now, if they find out that there are criminal issues, they can turn them over to the criminal system and they can hold them for a little bit, but then they should be turned over to the criminal system and put in criminal detention and prosecuted by criminal law, which I've talked about in some of the other segments. So that's CBP. They can detain people. They can obviously arrest people, and I should have put this first, but they detain, arrest right there when someone's coming in. Anyone who's not coming in at a port of entry, that is unlawful. All of us have to go through a port of entry, as I've talked about before. So the sheer fact that they're not coming in at a port of entry gives CBP the right to arrest them. Or even if they're at a port of entry but not presenting themselves for inspection, they can be arrested and detained. And then when I have detain up here, I mean like where they're holding them. So these are things that CBP does. And we see this sometimes in the news, especially this part right here, when we have situations where families are split apart. So the parents are being held and the children are being released to go out on their own, or they're being held too long, or the facilities are supposedly inadequate, or whatever it is. These are things that are happening shorter term, protecting the border. Over here we have ICE, and ICE actually has a lot of roles. Some of their roles have to do with the criminal justice system, and I won't get into that as much. ICE can arrest people who are here unlawfully or detain them. Technically, this should really be detain as well. They should detain people. They can do that on their own. They can pick people up who they have reason to believe are here unlawfully or are removable for different reasons. So they can arrest those people. They also receive people from the criminal justice system. I talk about this in another video, but if the criminal justice system is saying, here, we have someone who doesn't have permission to be here, we're going to turn them over to you, they maintain connections with the criminal, and vice versa. ICE will, as I talked about over here, ICE will give people to the criminal justice system will give people to ICE. So when someone is getting arrested by ICE, it could be either them going out and picking people up or the criminal justice system giving them people. Non-citizens, usually non-citizens, sometimes citizens, and that's not okay. But mostly we'll focus on the non-citizens. And then we have detention, like the holding them. In theory, this should not be jail because this is not a criminal matter. They have purportedly violated a civil immigration law. So we are detaining them in ICE facilities. We have actual ICE facilities. There are large facilities, various different places in the country. If you work with immigration at all, you become familiar with those, the different places they are, where people are being detained while they are waiting for immigration removal proceedings to start or to finish, somewhere in that process. The other type of detention that we see sometimes is ICE will contract with local counties and states to have a certain number of cells in their jail. And again, these are people not being charged with a crime, they're being charged with a civil violation. And so some people have real concerns with that. I have had times where I've gone into local jails and you're there with people who've committed crimes, who've been convicted of crimes, and a non-citizen alien who overstayed their visa. And they're in the same place being treated a little too similarly, in my opinion, because this is not the same kinds of issues. But that's how ICE finds ways to hold the people if they don't have enough space or it's far away, because they're large facilities. There are a few in the country. And so sometimes it's better to be in the local jail and be close to your community, to the immigration court you need to be in, somewhere your family might be able to come see you, etc. So this is just an overview, like I said, but I wanted to at least address a little bit of, we hear this idea of just they got picked up by ICE or they got picked up by immigration. Two different places. We have the border and the ports of entry. We have inside the country different things happening. And this is all for just removal proceedings. As I mentioned before, there are also criminal proceedings that ICE is a really big agency with a lot of different parts. There are parts of ICE that work with criminal things and helping investigate and prosecute and then detain, etc., for criminal issues as well. So that's a whole different area that is more of a criminal law issue. I think that's it. If you have questions about this, let me know. If you found it helpful, great. If you're confused, pretend like you didn't watch it.